Good afternoon. I wanted to start my side of this conversation with Sarah by making a point that if anyone has any questions or any points they would like to raise whilst we're conversing, I think that'll be nicer than having questions at the end. So if someone has anything that they want to add to the conversation that we're having, I think that'll be a nicer way to run through it, won't it? So one of the reasons why I'm here, I suppose, is that I first encountered Sarah's work last year in the Swansea Open at the Glenvivian. So I was asked to be a selector for that exhibition, and Catherine Webster and myself went around the works, all spread out, and we, both of us actually, Catherine and myself, honed in on Sarah's work, this particularly large piece that she had, where there was an interjection of photography and mark making. And at the time it was, it really stood out for lots of different reasons: the sensitivity of materials, the confidence of the mark making. I think that was one of the things that stood out for me, and the attention to detail. I think that I felt that there was a lot of editing and thought that had gone through into this work. Sorry to be. I don't want to. So it just had this brilliance of being kind of having energy, but also being quite calming at the same time, or quite sort of evocative of a thoughtful space, which for me I really felt quite a powerful, unique thing. And so Sarah went on to be selected as the first prize winner, and then since then we've had several conversations about her work. I was fortunate enough to come in a couple of weeks ago, and Sarah and I had a conversation whilst the work was all, I'm sure maybe a few of you saw the work maybe when it was kind of being worked on and everything was out on the floor, and there was this real, amazing energy in the space. So I suppose my first question to Sarah would be to start where this particular body of work initially emerged from.
Yeah. So there's quite a long story, but to kind of shorten it and speed it up to this work, I moved to Wales 9 years ago, and lived in an oak woodland, 80-acre oak woodland for 5 years, off-grid. And I was making oil paintings. That's what I make, is oil paintings. Most of the time, I'm consumed by this, I'd say now. And I wanted to make something of the woodland. And there was a timber framer, my partner, and a blacksmith, and they were using the woods for their work. And someone said about these oak galls down here, do you know you can make ink from oak galls? And I looked it up, I googled it and found some recipes and started making it. And from 2011 I started making this ink. And I was also making, behind you there's the photographic pieces, which I call moon drawings, and I was making them at night, a kind of full moon ritual, walking the dog, and drawing, using the moon to draw with. And it wasn't until 2017, and I had a residency at Elysium in their project space, and I thought, okay, I'm going to put these together. I was quite pregnant, 7 months pregnant, and I had a sit-down project. I'd make small photographic with oak gall and just see what would happen, because I hadn't given myself that time to explore it, and I really wanted to, but I was always doing oils, which I love, but I just couldn't find the space or the time, and that was it. That kind of started something. So then when I was offered to come here, offered the residency and support for an Arts Council research and development grant, it just seemed amazing, and I crammed in the application and got the grant. And it was about making bigger work and seeing what the photographs would be like big, because they were all this big. They're quite expensive and big pieces of canvas, and just pushing that further.
Yeah. I mean, you can really see that you've utilised that
It still surprises me, these little wooden balls. And
could you tell us a little about the scientific sort of or the not necessarily the scientific thing of them, but how they
So
how you
they're
break
really
them
high
down.
in gallotanic and tannic acids. There's a whole chemistry system to it, which I also like. Although my approach with making the ink, a bit like when you're painting, you just get the hang of it and you make it and use it and mix it and it becomes yours. But when you mix the oak with iron, so if you leave an axe in a piece of oak, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but it leaves a black mark, and that is the ink. So the iron and the oak tannin makes black ink, and it's indelible. And it's still used in official manuscripts, and
Right.
the Magna Carta is written in oak gall and on vellum.
Really?
Because it's permanent. It's one of the few, I think walnut
Gosh.
ink is, but it's one of the few permanent
That's really
plant
fascinating.
inks.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, isn't it? That it's this kind of ancient,
Yeah.
woodland ancient thing.
Yeah, it's nicknamed ink of monks, poets and kings.
Right. Okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I've found particularly fascinating is this translation almost of the material to a sort of visual language that you've built. And I think, you know, the upscaling of mark making that you've achieved, and the sort of playfulness, I think, of the, like we talked about, this idea that, you know, it's abstraction, but it's not total abstraction, and it's not representation. It has this sort of, I mean, would you say that would be the correct way of looking at it?
With the kind of, some of the lines do come, like this one, come from the woodland, kind of as an initial source. Not in a kind of direct descriptive manner, but more about the experience and how, I suppose, being in nature, but being in a woodland and living in it is so intense. Not really seeing the outside world. So it's about that, let's say, transformative experience, and there's a meditation to it. But so these ones are all, and the ones with the sort of circular lines, they're not coming from that at all. It's coming from exploring the ink and a kind of meditational state,
Sure.
seeing what.
Would you say performative as well, like with the
Yeah.
action? Because I mean, specifically this
Yeah,
one, I
definitely.
find a sort of performative nature,
Yeah.
because
It
I'm
feels like I mean, all of it is a bit of a dance.
yeah, that's a nice way of
And
putting
there's a
it.
rhythm, and for this, in the past I've listened to music in my studio, or any kind of sound. But the title of this is Treasure in Stillness, and it's about that experience of meditation and potential transformation. It's also about having children and coming in and just having a kind of space to yourself, where you can be still, and how necessary that is if you can find it.
Definitely.
And find that in yourself. So in approaching these, I was kind of excited by being in here, but I had to slow myself and to make the work.
Yes, yes, I understand, definitely. I think there's the way you talk about the forest and the woodland being this intense experience as well, because I think that idea that, you know, nature is an escape or is something that is, but it's kind of, it's almost like belittling it slightly to put it in this bracket that, you know, it's somewhere we can go and like feel kind of, you know, an escapism, which is kind of true, but also it has its own non-human existence, doesn't it? It will be there without us. So
being a part of it, really.
Yeah,
it's
that's
that
right.
Rather than, I suppose, consuming it, or it's more like, less like a postcard.
Indeed,
and more kind of being, it becomes a part of you.
very much so. That tangibility of the
collecting
materials.
water, collecting wood. It just, I don't know. I mean, before then, I lived in Cornwall, West Cornwall, and there aren't many trees. There's trees in the valleys, but I'd say there's just telegraph poles, and then this kind of moorland and coast. And then I landed in this woodland, and suddenly it's just all really vertical, and you can't see much.
Yes, yes.
So it's intense.
Yes.
It's not expansive.
I think there might be some lake cameras. Yeah, of course. I think that sort of that kind of interesting crossover of the sensitivity of the oak gall and that delicateness that it has as well, I think.
Just, I don't know, funnily enough to say, from living in the woodland rather than visiting, we found that winter is almost the nicest season.
Okay.
Nicest as in, the leaves aren't there, there's more light, there's a feeling of space. Whereas in the summer it's dense and drippy and damp, and these trees are growing, they're competitive, but it's kind of got a quiet in winter, which you only really feel by being there all the time.
Sure.
It's like a regular walk, isn't it? You see the little
Definitely.
stages. If you repeat something, then
That idea of a returned visit or repeated rhythm of going in and being immersed and experiencing it, isn't
noticing
it?
how high the stream is, or
Yes.
how high the grass is, and
Yeah.
the little kind of minutiae of change.
Yes, that actually, I remember writing down the idea of whether seasonality, that notion is something that is in your work, the idea of, would you respond or react to something differently month to month, not month to month necessarily, but season to season?
Probably respond to the amount of light. But winter's a good time to work, and once I'm in the studio, it's just me and the work, really. I don't work on plein air.
That was another interesting point. You're not directly working, say, in the
You
in
get
the
a
woodland.
different kind of work.
And
it's not what I'm looking for. I kind of become influenced by it in a way that is beyond memory and sensation. It's more visual when I just try and it always seems to be a studio-based practice.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, seeing how this body of work has developed in the space itself, I think is, particularly this large piece has become, the way it's displayed has become quite sculptural. I know that's a very easy thing to say about something hanging, but I think it's for me, I can imagine like a full room of these like hanging and walking in amongst it all.
But that's what this has allowed.
Yeah.
That's what this space has given me. It's clean and empty, and a kind of blank canvas, and then this working on a larger scale, but then being able to do this sort of thing.
Yes.
And having a team, basically,
Yeah.
of other artists
a really good team as well.
to help with ideas and in terms of curation and how to use the space once I've got the work and you select and why didn't you just hang it up on there?
So your studio is kind of it's not connected to other artists. Studio is it's on itself. So in the sense, that idea of coming in and being amongst other people.
Yeah, and just at the right times having that kind of input.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my studio is smaller than that piece of canvas. I've got 2 rooms. Added up, they would be, but I couldn't do this. So it's just an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. Like you can definitely see you pushed it to its. This is an edit, isn't it, of the work that you've made as well. There was more and more daily activity in here.
Well, I had the floor covered,
Yeah.
and I suppose I'd say every piece of paper, everything was conceived separately. And what having this big floor allowed me to do is make something, start something, set it to dry, start another one, keep doing that, and then move them around, and surprising kind of relationships happened. Nothing was a deliberate. I didn't join things up to carry on. And if I do, it doesn't work anyway. So it's too sort of contrived, maybe. But where they met, it just everything seemed to be a surprise, which was really, really nice to find and be able to do in here.
Without any pressure, I suppose. Without any
my own pressure though of the time, and it's like, come on, use the time, because but I work like that. I work very intensely
And would you say that's because of your life as a mother of two?
There's that,
Yeah.
but there's also, I think it's me, and I have kind of highs and lows of working on rhythms, and you can't sustain
Yes.
this intensity.
Do you find stepping away is quite a nice moment, as you know, to step back and see, and sort of see from a distance all the strand lines in a way that have sort of happened?
And time always seems to, I mean, time can finish a piece of work. It's quite hard. I find it quite hard to see it in the moment, and I can be unsure for a long time. And I don't sort of stand back and think, what does it need? It's all really up close and quite intense with the materials.
Sure.
Yeah.
You also said to me that the times we've met that the work was about a colour experience, which I love that idea that it's about an experience of colour. Because I think one of the interesting things you were saying about the oak galls is that the different colours you can achieve from it, the different intensities.
And textures, and they behave differently on different supports.
Yeah.
But with this, I just was finding that the support became part of that colour experience. It was no longer the background, and I kind of wanted to create a flicker. Some of these where you don't know which colour you're seeing first, and you look at one and then you see another, and find that the paper is a colour. I mean, I know obviously it's a colour, but it's part of that flicker, and it's no longer just the background. And that was important.
Definitely.
To that, and each different paper material, trying it on the coffee sack, just really, they all responded completely differently. The colours change, and obviously the flow, and
the rate of absorption, that sort of thing of materials.
And when you hold it, I'm really enchanted by these oak galls. If you hold it to the light, it can actually look like gold.
Yeah.
It's quite, I think they're magical.
It's definitely worth after the talk having a real close look at some of the textures, I think, on the works, isn't it? Because they do have that, not pearlescent, but they're really interesting kind of layers and textures. So, you know, if anyone wants to get up and have a close look at it all, I think it's a really good opportunity, isn't it?
These ones are gesso. The panels are on a gesso panel. So it's different again. It's as obvious as that is. It's that they'd be different. It's also, you just have to try it, don't you? Do it. And
definitely. Yeah. Again, that's probably what this brilliant, space and opportunity allows, is that, time just to think, well, actually, I can try that with no pressure, and there's not someone saying to you at the end, you have to have an exhibition per se. It's not sort of a final.
Which is why I really like doing these I wanted to do on stretch canvas, because there's something about a stretcher, apart from money and logistics, that it's got a kind of status. It can have a price tag. It could be framed, and it's status, officiality about it. And I just wanted to make some big pieces without that encumbrance. And how do I get it here? How do I get it home? How do you pay for it? So this came as this was a roll, and then this was a bale. I mean, I've never used a piece of canvas that big before, but it came as a bale, so it had these creases. So I used them as part of the structure, and cut the canvas to be in keeping with where they were. So I was quite pleased when it had them already, because I was thinking of doing that, having started this kind of part kilt with the pleats. I've wanted to have some kind of, I suppose a structure.
Yes.
Something. It's kind of almost like an invisible holding, isn't it? It's not very visible.
Something to say that remind me of clothes. Clothes always have these folds.
Yeah.
It's so cozy to see something folded like that. It's really.
I was thinking the same about this one. It's quite ruched.
Yeah.
Sort of kind of petite
Like a seersucker.
Yeah, like seersucker,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about photographic elements? Because I think when I've been in, it's that magic of with the works, that element of like there's a revelation. The gold is exposed. It feels exposed in different papers. So in some papers or some materials, it feels very intense, and then in others it kind of fades. But you've got a sense of exposure, with the photographic process.
Yeah.
I find that obviously that's the magical part for me.
So it's going back to the woodland, and I think my son was probably 1 then when I started these, and he'd be in bed and I'd go out and walk the dog, so I was on my own, and it's kind of getting this space again and needing to take her out, but so I just took my camera, and it was accidental, which also has a magic to it, but it's literally using the moon as a light source and a long exposure and drawing with the moon, and creating different marks with that. So they're drawing, I call them drawings, moon drawings, and some of them look like brush marks, some of them like charcoal, and just seeing. It's about playing with different exposures, different kind of.
I was going to say, I think that's why they work so interestingly, like you say, because there is that playfulness with them. And I also, I enjoyed, especially the first one I saw, where there's that contrast of texture and the flatness of the black as well.
I have to say that these are actually supposed to be matte, or pearl as it's called, and I messed up with printing, and they didn't arrive in time. They had a hole in their chemical tank. So what happens when it is matte is that it's becomes unified with the panels, and there's a contrast in terms of the kind of harder lines of it, the black and white, but it kind of makes more sense when it's matte.
Well, there's an interesting connection to immersion as well, isn't it, with the moon itself and the full moon, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
The idea of sort of lunacy and...
Became a kind of full moon ritual, or opportunity it was, and then a ritual.
The lunatic.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. When we talked to it as well, there was an interesting story you had about seeing something late at night that was kind of...
Oh, well no, it wasn't. It was daylight.
Was it daylight?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, this is quite an interesting story.
I saw, it's a big woodland, 80 acres of oak woodland, and some places are quite wild and no one really goes there. And I was just on the kind of the path, so the circumference path with my dog, and she started barking like she's chasing a large mammal. And if you've got a dog, but they have different barks, and you get to learn what they're doing. And I thought, well, this is funny. I've never seen a deer here, and apparently someone else had. But I thought, if I just stop, and she started coming towards me again. She'd gone off on this mad lunatic bark, and started coming towards me just up the hill, and I just looked up the path, and about 100 metres up the path, this black panther, completely silently, just kind of padded silently across the path and disappeared down across the river, and she's going round and round in circles looking for this thing, and I couldn't tell anyone for a while. I didn't think they'd believe me, and then there were a couple of others who lived there in different parts of the woods, and one of them said, oh yeah, so-and-so saw half a sheep up a tree. And he said, and then one of them used to wear his head torch all the time, because we're off grid, and he said, oh, I saw this pair of eyes, and then I turned around that way and they were there, and my dad says you don't hear the big cat that got you. Just completely silent. Amazing. And I'd found getting off the path, I'd found areas, and I thought this would make a good den. This looks like a den, and maybe this kind
Scatterings of bones and things like
of
that.
day bed. No, it's just a kind of, but where nobody goes, it's big enough. And they've got to go somewhere, haven't they?
Well, you were saying this a lot of the time. There were pets there was a legislation brought in, and pets were not necessarily allowed. That were
Dangerous or Wild Animals
chocolate
Act,
animals or something that were
1974, and your pet panther had to go
somewhere.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
But they're called the beast of wherever, aren't they?
Was it Beast of Bodmin, wasn't it, for a while? And all
Beast
these,
of Forth. And
all these escapee things from zoos and whatnot.
but it was just so silent. And it wasn't, people say, do you think it was something else? But
definitely not. Wasn't perspective.
Yeah. And it was the dog that got on the scent. So it was wild enough, it was a wild enough space to really get lost in.
That's a nice sort of way of putting across how wild the space that you've been existing in speaks of. Some people could say a woodland, but that is a proper density.
Yeah, and there aren't
forest
many
or woodland
left really. That was an opportunity in itself to live there.
Yes, I think there was something that we talked about, the idea of how your work is sort of informed and affected by the world you absorb, by whether or not it's affected by nowness in a way, the political, the socio-economical kind of now, as well as the, like we were talking about, the ecological nature of making work as an artist in the 21st century. How do you approach that? The ideas of different understandings of materials and plastics thought that'd be interesting.
Climate crisis and plastic pollution. It's all gearing up, isn't it? There's so many bodies coming together to shout about it, and it's the most important thing of our time to sort it out. So using these materials, I can't say it's not organic cotton, but I'm getting there. I'm not buying. These are free, which is great for me, and they're completely ecological. And they happen anyway, and I think the nowness is about talking about it. I realised that I might be living and progressively living more ecologically as I can, but actually to talk about it in a way that's not preaching, non-preaching way, just in conversation.
I think so.
It's just so relevant and so urgent.
The immediacy of the conversation, isn't it? I think that's what.
And these are a celebration of the world we have, and the magic of that and nature, and so in part of the meditational process of making them, I'm thinking of those things. So that's now, isn't it?
It is, I think. That was one of the things I found interesting, that they're not. When you talk about escapism, I think it arrives, the world, the wholeness of the world is into these pieces, though. It's not like you sort of turning your back on it. It's definitely, for me, I whenever I see the pieces, you can't help but bring the level of, you can't escape sort of the political nature of materials. I think that's one of the most interesting things about.
Well, you have to question everything, don't you? You have to read every ingredient, find its source, question every piece of plastic. Accidental, isn't it? Sometimes, this has come wrapped in. This canvas came in a cardboard box, but it came wrapped in plastic as well, and it wasn't really necessary. You don't know these things until you've got them.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting, though. I think it's
we'll
one of those.
Reuse it.
Yeah. But I think that idea of the conversation that majority of people are having now is it's a more engaged thing, isn't it? I think, which is, as an artist, that's one of the most important things you can, to be aware, isn't it? Or be aware of it. I think, whether or not you embrace or the complexities of making art.
Well, we've got the power, haven't we? We've got the choice of what to buy, and
Yeah, that's true.
it's actually down to us, and that's quite epiphanal. It's quite liberating. It's not someone else is sorting out. It's us. It's like we can choose.
Yeah, I think you made that
and
point.
if you can't afford it, then you can choose not to, can't you? So,
Yeah.
It's like organic food. It's come down in price. But we crossed over, when we had our conversation the other week, we crossed over where talking about literary influences.
Indeed, yeah.
And about landscape and nature and when I was doing my MA, I decided to look at how other people represented or made work about nature. So I don't mean in a representational descriptive way, but just how they did it, and I didn't want to look at visual art at all. So I looked at writing, and I wanted to find someone who wrote in a way that I wanted to paint, so I could, I suppose, also learn about how to write about what I wanted to do for myself, and then, you know, we have to write artist statements, don't we? And so having kind of gone through various books, you've read Nan Shepherd's
Yes.
The Living
Yeah.
Mountain.
Very recommended. Yeah.
You've read it, haven't you? You had it as a book club. Yeah.
Amazing.
I missed that.
Yeah.
But I grew up in the foothills of the Cairngorms, and I came across her book, and I thought, this is it, isn't it? This is someone who knows the Cairngorm Mountains kind of inside out from her perspective, and I know them pretty well. So let's see how she writes about them and how that relates and resonates to what I feel about it, and then how I make my work. Yeah, it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, and we also sort of drifted on. I've actually brought my copy.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about Kathleen Jamie as well, who's a contemporary poet writer, and she writes beautifully of Scotland as well, but as a kind of interesting, she manages to connect her life as a mother, and as she manages to, instead of just saying, oh, now I'm going out into the landscape, it's how it is all interwoven and interconnected with her life as someone sort of existing within the contemporary world, which I find like it was very a unique voice.
Yeah, it took me about half the book to get into how she was writing, and there's kind of a slowing down, isn't there?
There
it's
is,
a bit
yeah.
like beachcombing. In fact, it's called Findings, isn't
It
it?
is called Findings,
Yeah.
yeah. And her other one's called Sightlines, I think. They're both really excellent reads.
Sometimes a line, a paragraph, a sentence can be
Yeah.
really inspiring for me, to go and make some work, really.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, speaking as a maker myself, I think I find literary influences probably greater than visual references. I think sometimes maybe it's the world we live in where, you know, it's nicer it's a more sort of a better space to put yourself into the sort of repetition of words.
If you're making something visual as well, you maybe don't want that interference, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Definitely.
And influence, you can't help but be influenced, and sometimes you just need to, I need to just do my thing, and there's enough influence.
Definitely, yeah. There's an interesting passage where Kathleen Jamie here writes about darkness that I felt was something that the idea of our vocabulary ebbs with the daylight, closes down with the cones of our retinas. I mean, I looked up darkness on the web and was offered Christian ministries offering to lead me to salvation. She says, pity the dark, we're so concerned to overcome and banish it. It's crammed full of all that's devilish, like some grim cupboard under the stair, but dark is good. And I just kind of felt that was sort of a real interesting resonance with the sort of moon.
Dark and winter.
Yeah.
Something about closing in. And actually you were asking
Definitely.
about photography, and that was enjoying that time, that darkness. And actually they're about the light in the night.
Yeah.
That moon, and drawing with the light. yeah, I think in a way the work is all about colour and light, even though it's very pared down and it's brown and black and white and natural colour, but it is about those
Yeah, definitely.
relationships and getting a flicker, a kind of shimmer. Find the oak gall really exciting for that.
Definitely.
There's a calligraphic quality to these works. I can't get away from that. I was trained as a calligraphy, so I can't get away from that sort of calligraphic influence within these.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether that's the oak gall ink that's leading those sort of mark makings because of the qualities of them.
Possibly. I mean, there aren't any really gritty, gunky ones. Some of them I call oak crust. So because I'm making it, I can decide on how smooth and how gritty it is. But actually, I think the ones you're talking about, I used a Chinese brush, and that just gives that kind of mark, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean this one as well, because I think you use brooms for that.
Yeah, I did.
There's quite a lot of Japanese. I've seen Japanese calligraphy brushes.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Sweeping marks like this, and it reminded me so much of that kind of meditation that goes with those kind of marks. Yeah.
So it's using, but because I guess like a calligraphic pen or a nib.
Pen,
yeah, you've got the wide and then coming down, so it's narrow, and that's what I was doing.
That's a really interesting point about the idea of the sort of Japanese aesthetic as well, that sort of connection to the landscape. And again, so a writer like Matsuoso Basho or someone like that who lived and walked and wrote about the landscape in such a fascinating way. It's one of my favourite books of all time, I think. It's such a sort of wonderful treatment of the landscape.
And actually, a Chinese scroll, you can roll it up, fling it out, and it unfolds before you. But I've always used brushes like that. Just even bristle brushes, quite wide, and then on their side they're narrow, and maybe just have two.
It's what brings the rhythm to it as well, isn't it?
There's no changing of brush, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
I have to write down that book
Basho,
you just said.
I didn't think of that one beforehand. But also, it's interestingly like when our conversations, for me, the movement, the arte povera movement, the idea of poor materials and the idea of using what was around you, and I love that aspect of the sort of extension of where your work is going. And for me, someone like I don't want to do this too much about influences, but someone like Giuseppe Pannone, who owns a patch of woodland and has been making work with trees for decades, but also kind of writes really eloquently about the woodland and forest and everything like that. I think it's kind of, it seems to be that sort of immersive nature of a space that lends itself to.
Yeah, I need to read that. I like artist writings.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes more than the work. Well, usually.
Would you mind if I read it? There's a really interesting passage that I found that was for, so this, I don't know if anyone knows his work, but this is the kind of thing he gets up to. He sort of chisels into trees and finds the original sapling, and it's quite an extensive sculptural legacy. But he's written, so this book is all his writings, and to enter into the forest of wood is to embark on a voyage in time, into the history of every single tree and every year of its life. The slowness with which a year in the life of a tree is traced and uncovered records its growth. The slower it is, the richer in details and little stories and consciousness it will be. I just thought that was a really kind of nice sort of poetic language in which you can discover woodland, can't you?
Yeah, really nice. So he owns a woodland, and
he has, I think it's like a family woodland, and he's made work on and off there, and sort of intervened over time as well. I think that idea of going back, that like you do, going back into somewhere, and again and again, it gives you a different you're not on
immersion
residency in a
or
woodland.
repetition at least, but immersion is.
Yeah.
I think that's what this is as well.
Could I ask, do you have any, has this sort of space provided you with any a push on for the next ideas or plans, or is this the opportunity for scale?
Yeah, it was really allowed me to develop ideas that I wanted to, and there are so many, and then others are springing up, and I've got loads to do now. I'm not one to get stuck. There's a kind of combination of work. It works, but each one can just lead down a hole.
Yeah. Would you say, because this was one of the later things you did in the space, wasn't it?
I kind of worked up to it, and it was also about, it took up most of the room. I'd love to make some more big ones. I don't know where, maybe outside. I guess outside is the one, isn't it?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It just became, these are big, and it's big pieces of paper. They kind of shrink in this space. But once I was on the big canvas, it's 5 meters long, and then this is 3 by 3.9. It's really physical, and you've got your whole body in it. And that's really what I wanted to get to, because the work is physical, and it's about an immersion and an experience, and it's kind of all body, but this really is, a dance as well.
I wanted to say there's something really shamanic about this piece, because it's...
Yeah, and just...
Yeah, shamanic is a good word for it, isn't it, actually? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really exciting to make.
I don't know about everyone else, but I can see that the excitement, brought into that piece. I think it feels kind of fast and sort of.
Yeah. There's not much reflection in the time of making. I'd say afterwards, but I just get on with it. It's very kind of instinctive, intuitive.
I think that was one of the main points with this talk, was not to demystify your work. I think that's one of the strengths, of coming in and seeing the works like this and having a talk is to sort of generate a wider conversation about the work, but not to ruin the beauty, ruin the beauty and that initial encounter with a piece of work. I think that's something that's really important to allow and to keep, I think, so that you have, like you say, you have that moment of getting lost in something.
Well, it allows someone else to bring and take what they will. I'll just say though that the blue in this one, I think that's the only one here, is woad. So it's oak gall and woad. And woads it's a brassica, like broccoli, and it's our version of indigo, Celtic indigo. So that's plant as well.
It's interesting because obviously Scotland is kind of historically got the tartan and the sort of. I've been lucky enough to go to the Hebrides where they have, they still make weaving and material dyeing from natural heathers and. So it's a fascinating, colour palette you can draw, isn't it, from the landscape?
Yeah. Once you get into natural dyeing, there's such a breadth of colour.
Yeah.
But I was worried about this fading, because plant dyes and inks can fade, be quite fugitive. So I put it on a piece of paper and shoved half of it in a magazine and put it in the window for 2 years. And the magazine has completely disappeared.
Wow.
And this is fine. So, and it's not like it's
a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah. Because otherwise, they tend to go brown, don't they, when they lose the colour. And it would just be kind of, might be a nice brown, but a brown and brown.
Can I ask, before you went off grid, did you grow up in the countryside?
Yeah.
Because nothing prepares you for the move in the countryside. Because I live right in the
It doesn't wear off either,
It
does it?
It's so overwhelming.
I remember my son seeing one for the first time, and it was rising, a full moon. It was really low, kind of quite a clear landscape, and just blown away. That was...
It's like a light bulb. It's like a whole... Yeah, it's incredible.
And how much you can see as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like you say, the brightness that it actually brings to the dark skies never ceases to be. And then, like you say, I love those moments where you can be walking across somewhere, and then all of a sudden you'll see that low hung moon, and it kind of catches you out, doesn't it?
It is spectacular.
Yeah.
I can understand really the influence of living in the countryside and wanting to make work of it. You know, I can really relate to that. The piece of Buffy has really got that element of exposure that I was talking about, the piece at the top, because it does feel like one, you know, that one is sort of sunk into the paper and the other one's kind of moving away from it. With the colour. Really plays tricks with your eyes.
Yeah,
I love that. Really
that's what I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
But getting off grid was almost incidental. I wanted to get out into the landscape more, and I bought an old removals lorry and did it up to live in the front half, and the back half was a nomadic studio, kind of 2 metre cube, and I left Cornwall in it. I moved to Cornwall to get back up to Scotland in the Highlands and make work, to be able to travel and make work without renting and being stuck and not being in a car and having no space and not being weather dependent.
Yeah.
So I could just be anywhere and be with the moon, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds amazing experience. Challenging, I'm sure, at times as well, but like every life, I guess.
Yeah, sure. It certainly has its challenges and excitement and romance, and it's difficult.
You're not concrete now. Is that decision you made?
Well, we'd like to not be. We've bought a couple of acres with a cottage that needs renovating, and we're in a caravan. And to get a house off it, it's got its own ecological problems. You get into battery banks and storing whatever that is, lithium or mining lithium. You know, it's. We've got solar panels. Try and use. Think about light bulbs and things. So it's thinking about it, but it's an on-grid house, and got running water.
I remember when we were talking, like you had this bath in the middle of woods.
Oh yeah.
When we were barefoot, pregnant, talking in the list, I was like, wow, okay, I don't know if I can be brave enough to do that.
Yeah, once you've seen a panther, yeah, exactly. I don't know that they like fire though. I don't know if they like fire.
Yes, you wanted with fire underneath,
yeah. Yeah, so that was that's more of a kind of romantic experience than daily bathing. It's quite a lot of work, but it's it's amazing. You sit on a plank so you don't burn your bottom.
Okay. All right.
Great.
That was in the woods.
Yeah.
So you were I was confused when you said you're now back on grid.
Yeah.
By that, I was then immediately thrown into thinking that you're in here making this work, and you're very much back on grid when you're in this space.
Yeah.
So I'm then thinking you must be having other distractions, working even in a space like this, just being so urban, different context than what you're already used to, and you're still generally using the same themes and the same ideas.
Yeah.
What that has brought to this space? Has there been any conflict? Has there been any change in sort of the way you might work or conceive of things as you're going about it? The traffic out there, people dropping by, the silence is broken, all those other things that come into the mix.
The traffic was a challenge. I kept the door shut. But actually, my studio at home is quite remote, really, and to come here, there's an art community. I can speak to other artists, which I don't have. So the actual work isn't changed, but I feel more connected, and it's only a good thing. But I like going back, working where I am.
Yeah.
It's quiet and there's the moon.
Yeah. Like you say, that's the complexities of contemporary living, isn't it? It's the sort of being away and then being here and having conversations with members of the studios and people who are here and in and out, and that might manifest itself in the next year or so's work. I suppose that's the interesting part of it, isn't it?
I spent a lot of time by myself, or me and my children, so actually to have these contacts, it's great. And when I did the residency at Lyceum, that was fantastic. I suddenly met loads of people, artists, and it's kind of, art practice is normalised. It's in and out of conversation, and I don't mean to be isolated. It's just a way of living.
But you're right. When you said that earlier on in the conversation, you said intensity. I've forgotten when you're out in the remotest areas, you think that intensity is maybe lost, but it isn't when you can just stand there and just feel the deepest moment of that surrounding, that silence. It's a really intense moment.
It's in that stillness, isn't it?
Yeah. And now you're in here, and you've still captured a lot of that in this work. So it hasn't necessarily conflicted when the work, because you've conveyed a lot of that silence and a lot of that weirdness.
I think I've come in with the materials and an idea of where to start, and I think that's something I need to do. I came with some little drawings, and I didn't really have any material. I had some paper offcuts, so I did them before I arrived, in a couple of weeks before. It wasn't, not in that short space of time. It's not going to become about the city. I need more time for that kind of thing. I think this is about time as well. Time in that space, in that rural space.
I think we also talked, didn't we, about the act of the works in here wasn't necessarily about scaling up something that was this big, although that is the opportunity of a space like this, but it was obviously encountering scale, the different. It needs a different approach, doesn't it? Scale, like the different mark making apparatus and the different, like you say, the different approaches, and it's kind of an interesting thing. I think not to just say I'm not just blowing this little drawing up to this size, and it's a different kind of.
It's got that commitment, like you said, calligraphy, and either you're doing it or you're not, and there's one chance. And
poise.
It's all about poise. And if you're scaling something up, I think some people might do a grid and do it, I don't know, square by square. But I can't work like that. I did try once, and I got so sort of rigid, and I didn't understand it, and it went wrong anyway. And
that seems far too formulaic for the way you work, I think.
It's a kind of a build-up to the performance, I suppose, the dance. So you might learn the pieces, or I suppose another analogy would be improvised music. So there's always kind of fragments or sections that get put in, and it gets built, and there's a build-up, and then you're there in the moment.
Great. Does anyone have any more questions for Sarah? I think if not, then sure.
You said earlier on about being out of inspiration and that kind of thing, but you practice a studio place. So I'm just curious about when you're out. Do you make notes, or do you take photographs? Do you do any kind of documenting of any sort, or do you just kind of go by memory when you get back, or is
Yeah,
Both, and how do you do it?
yeah, I draw and I write. And I might not even, I won't look at the drawings for making paintings, but I'm drawing as a kind of a muscle memory in a way.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I take photographs. I don't work from those. I mean, these are photographs are the work, but photographs can help trigger a memory of time and then kind of locate you in a time, even just in that time of life, as well as the space that you're in. Yeah. More recently, just being in it. I think more and more it's just absorbing it and trying to take it in that way, kind of a full body absorption.
Bring that back.
Yeah, as a space to be, so get into that space to then make some work.
So it's kind of quite not philosophical,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You know, in a way, I suppose it is.
Yeah, philosophy of living and being or trying to be or work towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, working towards sort of being stiller, more still.
Yeah. More still, yeah. Stillness is a big
And it's
thing.
busy out there, you know.
Yeah, sun's out.
Yeah, and there's cafes and coffee and it's exciting.
I was thinking that about the energy because I love the thought of you being Lucille with that energy up there, and then being here with this different energy, but then actually being on the face, you know, with people walking right in the centre of it.
Yeah.
And you've got a show in it. We were in a group show in Lucille later in the year.
Oh yeah.
A big show, so we're back on the high street.
Yeah.
It's quite a funny dynamic for someone that lives right in the middle of the woods. There's so much time
Yes.
on Swansea High Street. I
Yeah,
love that kind
it's
of
great.
combination. It really is, isn't it?
It's excellent.
But just when I've been working in here and I've popped out to get something or see something, or just to get out, I suppose, and coming back in, it's suddenly really just, I immediately connect with it and get back into the work.
Yeah.
You know, it has stillness in here.
Yeah, it's very quiet, you know, lovely quiet
So
space.
many ways, yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah, thank you very much,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Thank you.